kind of also, just for a second, going back to my discussion yesterday afternoon, I want you to write this down, what I wrote on the board, and make sure that you understand essentially what those points are, because they're so valuable as far as, first of all, they're valuable in trying to understand why you feel the way you feel when you're practicing. You know, why some of the issues that are recurring, especially the issues that are recurring, why they're there in the first place, just so that you can see them more clearly. Because the thing about issues is, and this ties into the tapping, the thing about issues is that most of our issues are invisible to us. Most of our issues, most of the time, are invisible to us. They become more visible in a couple of different situations. All right, one is they become visible when you notice repetitive negative dialogue inside your head. Repetitive negative dialogue inside your head. Okay, that's an indication that there's an issue. Part of the reason, and we have different terms that even outside of the discussions that you've seen in the documentaries on the tapping, we have different terms that we use to sort of refer to these things, okay? So for example, if you have a voice in your head that recurs, that reoccurs, that comes from time to time when you're doing specific kinds of things, and literally the words are the same. It's like you realize that you're having, if you will, that there's like a voice or like a conversation in your head, and it's saying the same words, literally word for word, that it said last time in a similar situation. Okay? And we call that a tape.
Tape?
Tape.
Mm-hmm.
A tape. Now, of course, there are people in the class who don't remember tapes. Reel-to-reel, 8-track, and cassette. And even video. Oh yeah, but maybe you've heard of it. Okay. I remember when I was in high school, and one of my friends whose family was a little more well-heeled than all the rest of us showed up at school one day with an actual 8-track cassette player mounted inside of his car. It was insane. Literally, there were like 50 people around his car. And he had these cartridges that he would shove, and it was actually professionally mounted. You know, it wasn't just like laying in the car. It was professionally mounted. He had a baby blue GTO convertible. This is about 1969. You know, baby blue GTO convertible, and he had this 8-track cassette tape player, which meant that unlike all the rest of us in school, because he was the only one in school that had one at that time, he could listen to whatever he wanted to in his car. Didn't have to listen to the radio. Could actually make a music selection. And it was insane. It was just insane, okay? And the 8-tracks were expensive. The players were expensive and the tapes were expensive. But we thought that that was some mighty fine, high technology, you know, at the time. I had another friend who had an older brother who had just gotten back from Vietnam. And he had done R&R in Japan. And he came back with a Sony reel-to-reel player, a portable reel-to-reel player. Now the portable reel-to-reel player was as big as this chair and this table together. The portable one. Because you could, if you could lift 50 pounds, you could move it. It had a handle on it, so it was portable. And it was self-contained, and when you opened the front, the speakers would fan out. The speakers were about like this big, about that thick. And that was the first time I heard Jimi Hendrix was on a reel-to-reel player. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Literally thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I was like, who is this God I'm listening to? Okay, but tapes. Now back to the 8-track. Because they were expensive, initially maybe you didn't have so many of them. Okay, because they were like $35 or something like that when they first came out for a cassette tape. So what you would do is you'd punch it in and you would listen to it over and over and over and over again. You had your 4 tapes, which you would then listen to over and over and over again. In fact, you'd listen to them until you found their default defect, which was they would eventually wear out. And that was something that actually happened. People listened to their tapes until literally the tapes fell apart. Okay?
I did that.
All right, and then of course one on the cassettes. But see, the thing about the tape is, the concept of the tape is just that. It's a set of information that is played repetitively. And it's as if you created your own loop in your head. You guys have MP3s and iPods and whatnot, and you know about MP3s, and you know that basically you can loop them. You can actually, just like on my iPod, there's a setting where if I want to just play one song over and over again, it'll just play one song over and over again. Or one set of songs, like an album, or what. It'll just play them. It'll play them in sequence, or it'll play them randomly, but it'll just play them over and over and over again. When you put it on the random setting, it's interesting because you can listen to it longer. Because it seems like it doesn't wear on you as much. You don't get tired of the music as much because you have this kind of random selection that's happening. But it's still repetitive. All right, well, the interesting thing about these technologies is these technologies are actually based on the way we think and the way our memory works, the way associations work. Part of what we call life experience and the idea of being able to be progressively more knowledgeable and more experienced in life is this idea that when we're exposed to some information, it's encoded in the tissue, but it's encoded in such a way that it can be recalled. And that's a good thing. Okay? That's a good thing, because as you acquire these bits of information, which are in little blocks, you have various ways of accessing that information, so that in a future situation that's similar to something that happened in the past, you can access it and you can draw on that. Just like a DJ uses a loop from a 70s album to do a backtrack on an album that they're making right now. Grabs a loop. It was just a little piece of that song. Okay? And then they might distort it a little bit, or they might tweak the wave a little bit. They might stretch it out a little bit. They might amp up the lower frequencies and maybe filter out the high frequencies and emphasize the mid-range a little more. Depends if it's music or if it's vocal or whatever, so that they get this loop that has the sound that they want, and then they use that as the basis for a new piece of music. Okay, I'm trying to think who was really the first person who was famous for doing this. Believe it or not, it might be DJ Jazzy Jeff. Like actually Will Smith and crew.
Yeah.
Might actually be, you know, like you think Will Smith, you don't realize how absolutely monumentally influential on hip hop music and so on that Mr. Will Smith is. Okay, it's easily forgotten, you know. But from this idea, but see what he did though is he actually did something that all of us do naturally, which is we sample old information and we do it in real time, and we do it almost on a constant basis. And that actually forms a lot of our background thinking and the substance of the associative thinking that we have from time to time as we go through our day. Now, a tape is a set of that information that's particularly tied to an emotional orientation to what happened, or to the thought, okay? The words, the sequence of words. And we call it a tape because it plays repetitiously and it has the same words and the same tone, even the same emotional context as it did the first time we heard it in our head. Now, also what's really interesting about these tapes is that many of them, and I don't know, I can't give you a percentage, okay, but many of them you didn't make. They were given to you. It's like a loop or sample of music or information that was attached to you, was thrown at you by somebody else without your permission. And here's the really interesting thing, because the tapes have a hook. Okay, so in music, a hook usually is something like a bass line or a melody. That's a hook. That's how come you know, they do contests and whatnot where they'll have, you know, several people and they're going to play 3 seconds of a song or 1 bar of a song, and you're supposed to guess what the song is. And it's really interesting because most people can do it. Literally, you hear just a couple of notes, a bar, a couple of seconds of a song, and boom, you hear the whole song. You know it. Okay? The hook is those key elements of that bit of information that bring up the memory and bring up the association. And we are designed to do this. Again, it's part of what we call accumulation of life experience that eventually we might, if it's practical enough, we might call it wisdom, and so on and so forth. We're made to do this, all right? But there's interesting things about it. One of the interesting things, of course, is that it can be externally generated and internally simulated without your participation and without your cogent acquiescence or the giving of permission that I'm going to assume this. I'll give you an illustration. Real-time, clinical illustration. I had a client, her name is Cindy. Cindy's vice president for a construction company who was disabled with severe degenerative carpal tunnel syndrome with complications. She's left-handed, and it was her left arm. Her left arm was exactly twice the diameter of her right arm, as far as the swelling and inflammation, discolored, and she had atrophy in the left hand. In other words, she was losing the ability to even use her left hand. It was curled up like this almost permanently. Like she could get some motion, but anything she tried to do with it was extremely painful. Okay? And she'd been diagnosed with acute degenerative carpal tunnel syndrome. All right? Carpal bones are these big bones in the hand. Okay? They come together at the base of the hand and the wrist. All of the nerves, the radial nerve and the ulnar nerve that go through the arm, go through a notch at the base of your wrist, which is the carpal tunnel. It's the tunnel between the carpals. So that's why it's called that. And so you have blood supply, arterial and venous blood supply, and you've got two major nerves, okay, the radial and the ulnar nerve. They go through here. And when you overuse your hand repetitively, a motion, a narrowly focused but repetitive motion that you do over and over and over again, okay, and you begin to have inflammation from wear and tear on the carpal bones, the ends of these bones begins as part of the, it's actually a arthritic situation, because the ends of the bones start to inflame and start to swell up, and they start to put pressure on the nerves that are going through here. It only takes pressure less than the weight of a feather directly on a nerve to think that you're dying from pain at that place. You know, like we think we have nerve pain, and you think that that nerve is like about to be severed, that the pain is so severe. But then you do an MRI or a CAT scan and you look at it, and the actual impingement on the nerve is just barely touching it. Like hardly, like they got to zoom in and blow it up to be able to see that there's this slightest, teeny tiniest little bit of impingement, which is causing this crippling, devastating pain. And not only does it cause pain because of the nerve impingement, but you have an inflammatory process that also begins to impinge on the arterial and the venous blood. It begins to impinge on the lymphatic drainage of the lymphatic capillaries that are in the hand and in the arm. And as their circulation is distorted, okay, reduced, then the body responds with inflammation. The process of inflammation is a splinting mechanism. And the idea, the reason why your body splints or inflames so to make them immobile, areas like this, is because they're so now at risk of danger, of damage. And your body is attempting to immobilize you through this arthritic response. It's actually maybe more accurately called a rheumatoid response, okay? To actually help preserve some function. That's why it's doing it. And the more inflamed it is, the more you try to use it, the more likely you are to actually start creating damage, scar tissue, calcification is a further idea of the splinting and so on. So here I've got this client, her name is Cindy, she comes into my office, she's virtually, that arm is paralyzed with pain, it's swollen up like Popeye, it's exactly 2 times the diameter of the other arm, and she's been disabled for 2 years. She brings me her medical records, her x-rays, her little CT scan they did on her arm. She brings me her clinic records with occupational therapy because she was vice president for a construction company, so she had really good benefits. And, you know, she'd been going to therapy, she was diagnosed by orthopedics, she was in OT, PT, etc., etc. And she, the first day she walked into my office, she had had 127 treatment sessions with the occupational therapist. And this office is one of the best in Chicago, 127. And she was not one to do surgery or drugs. She was trying to be very natural in her life, even before she came to me. But the team of doctors, the orthopedic, the neurologists, and the occupational therapists had all recommended that she have surgery. And that what they do in the surgery is they open up the wrist, and they go in with a stainless steel Dremel tool, just like the one they sell at Home Depot, but it's made for surgeons. It's stainless steel, so you can sterilize it, and the diamond heads can be sterilized and all this kind of thing. It looks exactly the same size and everything. Okay, and they go in there and they open it up and they yep, and they shave off the ends of the bones that are impinging on the nerve, and then they sew it back up. cured, they say. Well, she did a little research. The research said that the average person who has that surgery has to have it again within 3 to 5 years. And 3 to 5 years after that. And then after the third time you have it, you can't have it anymore. And so one way or the other, it is an advanced, it's a deteriorating condition that even with surgical correction is not a cure, because eventually you will be disabled. One way or the other, the writing is on the wall. And her friend Tammy, who was one of my clients, had said, you got to go see Dr. J. You got to go see him. He's kind of good with this stuff. Okay, so she did. So I looked at all that, and I saw everything that was there, everything that everybody else had seen was really obvious. Okay, and I thought, okay, well, let's create a treatment plan that may be of help to her. And so, what do you think was the first thing that I did? Not yoga. But I did the arm, torso, arm, shoulder, arm, and hand, just like you guys have learned it in class, with the following exception that I did. The first thing that I did was do all that with my feet, with her on the mat and me standing on her. In other words, I did it walking style. Then I did it manually. Okay, in other words, I did the big things first, big, broad, deep compression first, and then I did the more minute thumb work, thumb pressing, palm pressing, did the hand routine, the whole 9 yards. And then I used I had at that time in my office, I had a GX9 medical vibratory apparatus, a Dermasonic machine, which is a real high-end vibration vibrator. Basically, it's a high-end vibrator. That's what it is. You want to pay $3,000 for a vibrator, you can get a GX. Really, they're amazing machines. I just love them. Okay, and I had sprung for one. I had one in my office, and then I put her on the infrared. And while she was on the infrared, whatever part of her hand and arm was on the infrared, I put a 4x6 inch by 1 thick ferrous ceramic magnet underneath of her hand. And so if the hand was getting the infrared from the palm side, the magnet was on the bottom. And if the hand was down on this side, the magnet was on this side. She'd lay her hand on it. And the first treatment was remarkable. She had remarkable improvements. She had a reduction in pain, and some of the swelling went away after one treatment. See, these other things that we do are called adjunct modalities. Far infrared, vibration, mechanical vibration, because I can only shake, jostle, or rock so much, and then I get carpal tunnel. So that's why I use vibrators. But I think that that's really called for. Magnets increase circulation passively. There's no myth. It's not something that natural medicine people have made up or that was invented on Facebook. That the reason why we use them on the body is because all of the science of how magnets affect the circulation of fluids were done for us by the engineering community at MIT. So, in fact, Professor Charles W. Pratt, former emeritus professor, department head of engineering at MIT, in the early 90s did a series of experiments where he proved that a ferrous ceramic static pole, ferrous ceramic magnet, will actually increase circulation of fluids in a closed-in hydraulic system, which is exactly what your body is. And it had all kinds of effects, which I'm not going to talk about. So that's why I would use a magnet. I want to absolutely guarantee that the circulation, all of it, arterial, venous, lymphatic, etc., is increased. Okay? Because that arm is also toxic. Not only is it inflamed, because the inflammation not only keeps the good stuff from getting in, it keeps the bad stuff from getting out. And also it's ischemic, which is part of why the tissue becomes necrotic and starts to die. It's because it doesn't have oxygen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a vicious thing once you get into it. But now here's where it gets really interesting. So by the third visit, she had enough of the reduction in swelling that I could actually start to manipulate her wrist and start moving her fingers more, manipulating her wrist and her arm. And in the third session, I went to do so, and I got a hold of her wrist, and what I was going to do was a very gentle traction and decompression, and then I was going to do a series of articulations on the wrist that are very, very similar to what you do in the level 2 foot routine, but do it on the wrist. Okay? As soon as I grabbed her wrist, I mean, as soon as I grabbed her wrist, and I grabbed her wrist very, very gently, she took a deep breath and started screaming as if I was stabbing her with a butcher knife. Just like in the movies. Like the person who's being stabbed with the butcher knife is screaming. She was screaming so loud and so horrifically that I was concerned for my neighbors, that they were going to call the police, that I think someone's being murdered next door. Okay? All I did was go like this. When I touched her wrist, she started screaming. So I just held on. Not tightly, I just maintained contact. And I started just talking to her in a calm way and asking her to breathe. Just take a breath. Just breathe. And finally she kind of did. And she calmed down a little bit. And she was all teared up. And she was hyperventilating a little bit. And I go, Cindy, look at me. And she looks at me and I go, Cindy, where are you? This is my exact words. Where are you? She blinked really hard, and after a minute, she goes, I'm at my grandma's house. And I go, you're at your grandma's house? And I go, Cindy, how old are you? She goes, well, I'm 7. And I go, what's going on around you? Why are you at your grandma's house? And she just started bawling, just started crying. So I just wait a minute. The seconds, really. That's all a minute is, a few seconds. It's not long. Okay. I got that much time. So I go, what's going on? And she said, well, the whole family's there. My uncles are there, my mother, father there, my aunts are there. I said, everybody's at your grandma's house. What are they doing? I said, well, they're sitting at the kitchen table and they're playing pinochle. Okay, well, maybe you guys don't know this, but certainly in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, it was like a thing that people used to do, was play pinochle. They played, you weren't a bridge player. You had poker, pinochle, or bridge. It's going to go fish with the kids. It's like something that families did. And she said they were real. Everyone's upset. These people, they're playing and they're kind of hanging out in the kitchen, but there's kind of a sad angriness in the room. I go, okay, why is that? She goes, well, my grandma died, and this is after the funeral, and everybody's gone back to grandma's house, and they're just chilling, having food, hanging out, talking to each other, drinking quite a bit, okay? Drinking quite a bit. And a lot of recrimination kind of stuff going on. Apparently there was some unresolved stuff with grandma's will, and, there's kind of, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like my mom's house after my mom's funeral. I was like, even though my mom was still alive at that time, but, now I would say it was about very similar type of thing. Okay, except with the drinking, because my family's fundamentalist, so nobody drinks squat. Okay, so, and And I go, well, what's happening? What happened? She just goes, I'm bad, I'm very bad. And I go, you're bad, you're very bad. I said, why are you so bad? She goes, because I broke it. I'm a bad girl because I broke it. And I go, tell me about it. What did you break? And she goes, well, the adults are just arguing and drinking and not ignoring me. So I went into my grandma's study, which is where we used to hang out all the time. And apparently grandma was a collector of Swarovski crystal tchotchkes. Grandma was a collector of Swarovski crystal tchotchkes. And she had cases, glass case, and had them all over her study. And all the little things, you know, like the unicorns and the Swarovski fairies, and you know, she had all these and the little animals and the little things. She had the little castles and the little and when she was alive and when Cindy was with her as a child, Grandma would there was a verboten. Nobody touches anything. These are valuable. They're Grandma's tchotchkes. So people would even just avoid the room. However, Grandma would let her 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old granddaughter play with them under supervision. You know, she'd be in there and she'd be doing some needlework, or she'd be sitting on her chair and sewing, and Cindy would go over and would get like the unicorn and the little castle off of the shelf with permission, and she would, you know, play with them. Do her little Disney thing. Okay? And then she'd put it back. Well, on this day, she had gone into Grandma's study and she decided to do something that was familiar and comfortable to her, which was play with the crystals. And as she was getting the unicorn off of the shelf, she kind of slipped a little bit and she kind of leaned on the shelf a little bit, and the glass shelf fell down and all the things fell down, and several of them broke, and the glass shelf broke. The adults who were in the kitchen heard this and came running into the room, and one of her uncles runs over to her, grabs her by the arm, jerks her to the feet, and starts screaming at her what a stupid, disrespectful, ignorant little girl she was. Now, obviously, she didn't love Grandma, that on this day of all days, that she was going to go and break Grandma's stuff. He shook her so hard that he dislocated her arm and her wrist. And then they had to take her to the hospital because he broke her. Then they had to take her to the hospital, and they were drunk. Now, if that happened today, they would have been arrested. They would have been arrested, and she would have been put in a foster situation. They would have taken her away from them. Went to the hospital, all the way to the hospital. Everybody is screaming and crying at what a stupid, disrespectful girl. That instead of them being able to just mourn in peace, which mostly means sit around, drink, and argue, you know, that's their mourning in peace. Instead of being allowed to sit around and drink and argue and ignore the children completely, now it's all about her. And so Grandma's funeral day is now all about her. And how disrespectful, and they yelled at her, and they called her stupid, and they called her names, all the way to the hospital. She got treated at the hospital, and they did this all the way back. And until she was 30 years old, every holiday, like Christmas, Thanksgiving, because it was close to Thanksgiving, I think, when Grandma died, when the family would get together, they would remind her how once she was such a stupid, little girl and disrespectful, they would remind her until she was old enough to tell them to SFU. I'm tired of it. However, here's the thing. She started having problems with her arm when she was about 30 years old. And over the next 5 years, next 3 years, it got to a point where she could no longer use it. And then, of course, she went to the doctor, and they said because she types, and she types a lot, it's her job as a vice president, and she does lots of stamping of things, but you think vice presidents just sit, in their ivory tower, harassing the staff. But actually, in many companies, vice president is actually a grunt job. That's why some companies have like 10 or 12 vice presidents. The reason why they have 10 or 12 vice presidents is that's 10 or 12 jobs that the CEO, CFO, and president don't want to do. So, in many cases, they're hard and overworked and underpaid, even though you might think they have a big salary. But proportional to the anxiety of their proportion in actual work, maybe not so much. Okay? And so they said that's what it was, this job stress and overwork, repetitive stress, typing too much. And that's what it was. And so they diagnosed her, they engaged her in a course of treatment, and then 2 years later she shows up in my office. And on the third day of treatment, I touch her wrist, and she starts screaming, and when she catches her breath, she tells me this story. And I go, "Oh, Cindy, I am so sorry." And she goes, "Yeah." I go, No. I'm not sorry. I mean, I guess I am kind of sorry that happened to you. I said, but that's not why I'm sorry. And she goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "You've been misdiagnosed." And her eyes got really big, and she says, "Well, what are you talking about?" I said, "Cindy, you don't have carpal tunnel. I mean, externally, you have all the symptoms, and I agree with your doctor's diagnosis." I said, "But that's not the issue." I said, "The reason why you have this restriction and you have this inclination to want to lose the arm is because of the issues and the tapes that are playing that relate to that day, which have not, to this day, been resolved. Even though you have accepted them." I said, "Let me," and she goes, "Well, no," she goes, "I think they've been resolved. I've worked with this." In fact, I even went to a therapist for a while, like 10 years. I went to a therapist. I'm like, "Oh, good on you." Went to a therapist for 10 years. I said, "So let me ask you a question. Is your uncle still alive? The one that injured you?" And she goes, "Yes." And I go, "What is your relationship to him?" She sat back and she goes, "Well, I haven't talked to him in 25 years. 20 years. In other words, like, I stopped talking to him entirely. I've avoided him like the plague all of my life. And as an adult, I had no contact or communication. I wouldn't accept a phone call from that man." I go, "Sounds like there's some unresolved issues that therapy didn't address." Whatever therapy you're in, it was talk therapy, psychoanalytic talk therapy is what she's talking about. With a psychiatrist, and yes, she had been prescribed meds for a while, which had made it hard for her to do her job, and eventually she stopped doing those meds because she could not work. But they had absolutely no impact on the story, which was playing periodically in her head. She was insomniac, she couldn't sleep, and nor could her boyfriend. I found out later that he was traumatized as well. With this deterioration. Loved her dearly, but after about a year, not being able to sleep because she moans and cries and thrashes all night long. That it was wearing on him. And he was thinking about breaking up with her. Just because of this. Okay? So, what did we do? I said, "We're going to go back and sort this out." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Okay, just bear with me for a minute. Close your eyes." And I did a rapid induction, deep breathing technique, which is actually a hypnotherapy process. and had to regress back to the exact day, exact time, and then we started describing everything. And she remembered and described explicitly every little detail of the house, every little detail of the day. She told me what was cooking on the stove and how it smelled, how the furniture smelled. She had exact and total and complete recall of everything about that time. She told me explicitly about it, and we talked about it, and I said, okay. And as she was doing this, her voice sounded like I was literally listening to a little girl talk. And then there's a point where I said, okay, Cindy. I said, okay, young Cindy. I said, but Cindy, you're not young anymore. You're a 35-year-old, college-educated vice president of a construction company. And you know a lot, been through a lot, seen a lot, and you know a lot. I said, I want you to come into the room with the little girl, with your younger self, and I want you to go over to her. Can you do that in your head? Yes. So she did. And I go, okay, Cindy. I said, get down on the floor so you're eye to eye, same height with her. She goes, okay. I said, now just get a hold of her and look her right in the eyes. And I want you to tell her something that is your best words that you would tell a 7-year-old child who you discovered in a situation like that, and you were able to get a hold of them. What would you say? What would you say? And so I guided her through a conversation with her younger self. And then I had her make promises to her younger self. Things like, I will always be with you. I had her talk to her younger self about what Grandma's perspective on this whole thing would be. In other words, had Grandma been in the house or in the room when that incident happened, how differently it would have gone down. What would Grandma's opinion be of her son dislocating her granddaughter's arm in a drunken, angry rage because she broke one of Grandma's precious Swarovski unicorns? Because she goes, well, she wouldn't care. She always told me to be careful. I said, well, would she care if you broke the unicorn? She goes, no, I mean, she'd say, be more careful. I said, if you broke all of them, what would she do? Literally, if you broke like every darn one of them. She goes, oh, well, I mean, she'd be mad at me, for a minute. But then we'd be on to something else. And she'd forgive me, and we'd be friends again. And because I said, because why? And I said, why would that be the way Grandma would react? She says, because she loves me. I said, and why did the uncle act that way? And then here's the thing that was so interesting. She didn't say because he didn't love me. She said because his mother had just died and he was a drunken, alcoholic fool who never responded appropriately in ordinary situations in life most of the time, much less when something big happened. His recourse was the bottle and violence, and he beat his wife too. So what do you think about him now? She goes, I'm really sad. I said, and when you have empathy for the condition of someone, what do? What's the right thing to do? She goes, I have to forgive him. I said, you do. I said, because you got to get it. He was suffering. And he was out of control. He didn't have control of himself. So when he was suffering, he suffered out loud. He suffered onto you. You were caught up in his suffering. You weren't the cause of his suffering. You weren't the cause of what anybody said or did. They were already in that place wanting to break something, wanting to have rage. But because it's not polite for the family to go into a blinding, foolish rage after grandma dies, after their mother dies, because we got all the social, polite, social, church, funeral, everybody's dressed up in their best clothes, and people coming and going to the house, and you can't just be running around screaming, breaking stuff. I said, but you were just the straw on the camel's back, the incident. It was just an incident. It was nothing personal. I said, you didn't break it on purpose, did you? She's like, no. No, I did not want to play with it. I want to break it. I'm like, exactly. No harm, no foul. You did nothing wrong. So therefore, there's no criticism of you. Not then, not ever, not now. And you need to communicate that to that girl inside of you. The one that keeps coming back and telling you when things are a little bit stressful how stupid you are and how likely you are to destroy everything because you're broken. And so she did. And I sat there and I listened to her have this conversation. And then this took, it takes longer to talk about it than it did to actually do it, just so I could put it in context. Okay, I was not emotional. I was talking just like I'm talking now. Okay, and that was the end of our session for that day. Okay, at the end of 7 sessions, 100% of all of the swelling was gone from her arm, and she had full and complete range of motion in her hand in 7 days. She'd already been scheduled for the surgery. So she went back for her surgical review, and she was in the OT's office, and the nurse came in and had all the paperwork and all the forms she was going to have to sign for her surgery and all this kind of stuff, and said, let's look at your arm. And so she looked at her arm and she went, I'll be right back. And so the nurse left, went and got one of the OT's, orthopedic docs. Orthopedic doc came in, just walked right over to her, got a hold of her arm, turned it over, looked at it, moved her arm around, had her stretch her arm out and back, move her hand around, open and close her hand. And he went, I'll be right back. And he went and got the other orthopedic doctor who came in, who did exactly the same thing. So there's the nurse and 2 orthopedic doctors, and they yelled for the OT guy to come in. He comes down the hall. He comes in. So now it's the nurse, 2 orthopedic surgeons, okay, and the occupational therapist all looking at her arm, and then the lead doctor, the guy who owns the practice, goes, yeah, we'll be back. We'll be right back. And then they, without any other commentary whatsoever, they all march out of the office and shut the door. After about 10 minutes, the nurse comes back by herself. And she comes in and she goes, well, we can still do the surgery if you want. However, the doctors feel that also if you wanted to wait, postpone a little bit, that would be okay too. And she goes, well, I think I'm going to wait. And so the nurse goes, okay. And so she didn't sign any forms, and the nurse walks out. Okay. That's after the 7th visit with me. That 7th visit with me was on a Tuesday. Her last OT appointment, pre-op review, was on a Wednesday. On Friday, she calls me up on the phone. There, little sister. Jill, what's she goes, I got this letter. I got this letter from the OT. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, they're billing me for 2 years of occupational therapy and all of my medical procedures, and I have 10 days to pay it. And I'm like, Cindy, I said, bring that thing to my office. I said, come at lunch. Bring it to me. I want to see it. So she comes to my office, and sure enough, there's a letter from the OT, from the office, from disability, and they have canceled her disability retroactively and had billed her for every medical procedure from day 1 office visit, from the first time she was having problems with her arm. to the present day, and there was a cash bill for $180,000 due, payable on demand, due within 10 days. And she's like freaked out. And she's like, I can't pay this. She goes, oh my God, it would have been, I should have just had the surgery. No, that's what she said. I go, Cindy, I said, all right, just bear with me for a second. I said, I need to ask you a few questions and we can work this out. And she goes, okay. I said, what kind of car do you drive? No, really, answer. Tell me, what kind of car do you drive? I haven't seen your car. She goes, well, it's a Saab convertible. I love my car. And it's got heated seats. It's a good thing in Chicago. It's a few years old. It's like 5 years old, something like that. But she loves it. You know, it's a cherry red Saab convertible. You know, good chick car. You know, safe, swoopy. And I go, what are the new ones like? She goes, well, oh my God, this is like light years nicer, more detailing, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I go, would you like one of those? And she's like, well, yeah, I'd like it, but no, I can't afford it. I go, okay. I said, Cindy, where do you live? Tell me again where you live. And she goes, well, I got a loft near South Loop, which is actually quite nice, have a loft near South Loop. And which she rents with her, leases with her boyfriend. And I said, if you could live anywhere that you wanted to, in any kind of a house that you wanted to, where would that be? And what kind of house would that be? She goes, what do you mean? I mean, where and describe. What kind of house? Would it be a house? Like, would you move up to North Shore? Maybe, which is even closer to where you work, and get one of those Sullivan designed brownstones? Or, you know, what would you do? I mean, where would you, if you could go anywhere here and live anywhere? She says, no, I just buy my loft. I love where I live. You know, West Loop is a cool place in Chicago. Be lucky to have a loft in West Loop, Chicago. She goes, that's what I do. I go, okay. I said, all right. I said, well, Cindy, you can have those and more. And we can make this go away. And she says, I'm not following you. I don't understand. I said, all right, read the letter with me. So we read the letter. And I said, I've got your medical records. We had 127 visits, plus MRIs, plus specialists, plus this, plus therapy, plus, which is what they're billing you for, just for the therapy. I said, it's 127 times you've been misdiagnosed. Because the reason why they disavowed her disability was because she no longer had carpal tunnel syndrome, and that's impossible because carpal tunnel syndrome officially is incurable. So if you were cured of carpal tunnel syndrome, of all the symptoms of carpal tunnel in a week, the only rational conclusion was that you didn't have it. Not that there was an emotional component to your disorder that had not been addressed, because it's not a factor in orthopedics, and it's not a factor in occupational therapy, that it is possible to have a complete degenerative breakdown of some part of your body because of an old, unresolved, negative emotional issue, which they do not know this. So they have misdiagnosed her 127 times. I said, you have a lawyer, right? That does like family business and stuff for you? And she goes, yeah. I said, leave here, take this letter, call him on the way, tell him you have to see him now. It's an emergency. And you have to see him now, and go to his office and just hand him the letter and see what he says. And tell him he can call me if he needs any counseling. So she did that. She did that. And so her lawyer told her that she had a prima facie malpractice suit, prima facie, and that he recommended going after him for millions. Cindy's a really decent, good person. And so Cindy said, I don't want to take advantage of their ignorance. They didn't hurt me, they just didn't help me. And I'm fine now. And so all I want is for this to go away. So a lawyer wrote him a letter, and I read the letter. It's just 2 paragraphs. He said, thank you for the bill. Thank you for your free admittance to multiple counts of malpractice. In writing on your letterhead. And really, we get it that it was just a misunderstanding and we would like this to go away. Thank you, sincerely. Let us know if you have any questions. And so they sent the letter, and lo and behold, on the following Wednesday, she got a letter back that it was just an administrative oversight. Nothing was due. So from Wednesday to Wednesday, a hard bill for $180,000 for medical expenses disappeared, went away. And Cindy, to the present day, is perfectly fine and has no remaining issues with her arm. All right? Now that's a story, but because of a story like that and other stories like that is how we get to here in the idea of the tapping. It is part of the story of what is tapping. Why does it work? How does it work? It's part of the story of why you have repetitive, negative kind of conversations with yourself when you're trying to practice that have wording that is not concurrent, that have wording and descriptions of who you are and what you are and how you are that have nothing to do with where you are now and when you are now. Those voices are repetitive expressions of old unresolved negative emotion that play in your head like tapes. And the hooks or triggers are situational. And you know that. You know it when you see it in a relationship. Sometimes Julie looks at me a certain way and all of a sudden there's 7 words that come out of my mouth before I can engage my mind. And that expletive response to a certain person looking at me a certain way is a tape. It's an automatic response. That apparently way of looking at me pushes a button. And that tape plays. Because at some point in my life, I learned that when people look at you a certain way, it means they think something bad about you. And you have to respond. Can't let that go. Can't let that go. Even today in court, you know that it's still a defense that people bring up when they have assaulted someone, that they looked at them the wrong way. That that's why they attacked him. Because they looked at him the wrong way. And the attack is a tape. Instead of just thinking the tape or saying the tape takes over your machine and you go all postal on somebody. It's still a tape, no less a tape. The thing that's interesting is part of the way you know it's a tape is because it always has the same voice. It always uses the same words. Always. Now you have more than one tape, so you can have variety in your tapes. We all have variety, great variety. We have tapes that actually we ingrained appropriate for every age of our life. We're making tapes right now. If somebody says something to you or criticizes you in a certain way and uses an emotional tone that in such a fashion that it sticks, that can be the formation of a tape right there. We always have this mimetic ability, this ability to mimic the negative things as well as the positive, but it's interesting to me always how the negatives seem to be stronger in this way. And not only do the tapes cause you to criticize yourself, see, none of us need anybody to criticize us. I don't need you to criticize me. You will never, if you were the world's best criticizer, like if there was an Olympics of criticizers who they'd bring somebody out, and the contest was to see who could criticize them the most, who could demean them the most, who could pick them apart and find every little weakness that they had the most. And if there was an Olympics, and you were the gold medal winner of that Olympics, you wouldn't hold a candle to the voices in my head sometimes. You wouldn't be able to hold a candle to it. I am the world's greatest expert at criticizing myself, as I have been taught to be. I'm in the process of unteaching me. How do you unteach yourself from these habits? Well, you have to change the software. You have to go into the code and you have to rewrite the software. You have to cut loose the threads that bind the tapes to your tissue. So you have to learn that they're there. You have to learn to see them for what they are. And then the way that you do it is by bringing consciousness, energy, attention, consciousness, breath, and pressure to them. There's a part of you that has a capacity to objectively reflect on your status without the influence of irrational, negative emotion. Just accept my word for it. Maybe you don't know that part yet or know it very well, but just accept my word. That's there. The objective self, the true self. That part of you that is never out of touch with God. It's there. Whether you see it, feel it, talk to it much, or what. It's just irrational. It doesn't matter. Just understand that it's there. Give it an assignment. The assignment is to teach me about me. The assignment is show me more clearly who I am and what I am. Show me the basis for why I'm the way I am. And show me in such a way that I can recognize it for what it is, and I can bring care and attention to it. I can bring methodology to it in such a way that I can begin to liberate myself from the bonds that inhibit my liberty in my head and in my expression. And if I can begin to do this, and if I can become better at it, maybe I can begin to share this idea and these technologies, if you will, with other people so that they can have less burden too. It's enough. We say sufficient unto the day are the troubles thereof. Much less that every day's troubles is compounded with every other day's troubles which are still with us. By divesting yourself of, it doesn't make history not happen. That's something very, very important. Like in Cindy's story, it didn't make the uncle not hurt her. History is still the same. The incident's still the same. But here's what changed. What changed was truly and completely her understanding and her perspective on what happened and what it meant. Not only about her, but about everyone. Which means, in that moment, not only was her arm better, but she was more enlightened. Tangibly. Why? What's an enlightened person? Look up the word enlightened. Look up the definition of enlightened. It means a person who understands. In Buddhism, it's used in the context of any truth that you gain a discrete knowledge and awareness of. In that moment, you are more enlightened than you were in the previous. And so, enlightenment is a continuum of expression, of understanding and connection, of what is true, but not my truth. What's true in you? What's true for you? And so class is a struggle, flow is a struggle, repetition is a struggle, lack of perfection is a struggle. But why is it an issue for you is based on your history. Not my history, not his history, not her history, your history. Why is it a struggle for you? Why does it hurt when you're not perfect? Because of the tapes. If you can begin to unwind those tapes, if you can begin to bring energy and consciousness to those tapes, they lose their ability to create distortion in real time. Does it make stuff not happen? That's history. We're not changing history. We are changing the understanding of history. Like when Howard Zinn wrote the True History of the American People, the first real American history book, which is way different than anything I was ever given in school. Because it includes, for example, genocide of Native Americans. It includes the real issues of slavery and how they continue to the present day, etc., etc., etc. And so he didn't rewrite history. He rewrote how we relate to what really happened, which all of a sudden opens up the possibilities of seeing the world as it is, which good, bad, or indifferent is actually healthier and more functional. And now making decisions based on that more aware being that you now are, you will make better decisions. And you will make less mechanical decisions, and you'll make less autonomous decisions. In other words, decisions and actions and behaviors which you know you're not in control of. And how will that impact your relationships? And how will that impact your physical health? How will that impact, we talk about how negative emotions can actually cause physical distortions. We know that negative emotions and tapes, try and have a relationship with someone where every word that you say to them is something that you said to somebody else some other time in another situation, and see how it works. And every time they say something to you, you react as if they're not them and you're not you now, that you're like in some situation in the past. And it's the same, but it's clearly not the same. So we tap on it. And we just get it. And keep working on it. It's a work in progress. And let go of any results in the sense of where's the perfection in this, when am I done? And it's just like, who's eligible for medicine? Well, as long as there's breath in the body, medicine is possible. So progress is possible as long as there's breath in your body. Which also, that sounds kind of nice, but I think of it in another way. So you mean I have to keep working on myself? Yes, that's what I mean. Exactly what I mean. See, we're not free of that until we're free of this. That's the way it works. Okay? Well, that was fun. All right, so we're going to break now. And thank you very much for your class and for your hard work up to today. We're getting on the downhill side of things, but please don't think that less is more. Less is more. Down here, we try to keep the pressure on as far as trying to give you as much as possible till the last minute.
True.
And also about this emotional and other kind of stuff and injury and arm. You want to talk to Rachel about her experience with a complete dislocation and separation of her elbow, both what the orthopedics told her and what transpired afterwards when she got good therapy. That's also a likeness of the story. Okay? Did you resonate with my story?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Daniel, what do you say? 15 minutes at the table for cleanup?
This was good.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll keep talking about this more, obviously. All right, but you're going to get new books today, too. I hope you guys have caught up on your What is Time and your BET book. We've got 2 more books coming.
today.
to read.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.